That doesn't look too good. This belt was so weak that a simple dryer sheet and a napkin completely halted the brush roll and set the belt ablaze. So, since this machine obviously needs a new belt, let's go ahead and show you how to replace the belt on your Bissell upright vacuum cleaner. Now, as far as what we'll need in order to replace the belt on our Bissell vacuum, we're going to need two things. A screwdriver, a Phillips head screwdriver, specifically just a standard Phillips head that for some reason this camera isn't focusing on. But we can see, just a standard Phillips head screwdriver. My particular unit has 4 screws. Some units will have 6 screws, some will have 5 screws, and some will not have screws at all and just have plastic clips that will pull off and release the lower base assembly. So, depending on your specific model of Bissell vacuum, this process will differ. Most of them, however, will usually have 4 or 6 screws. So, depending on your model, then this process may be a little bit different. If you're unsure about what specific model you have, therefore, or I should say, if you're unsure of how to take the actual plate off of your model, then simply let me know the model in the comments below. Let me know the name and the model number, which if you want to find the model number, it can be found usually on the lower portion of your Bissell vacuum. Sometimes certain models will have it on the bottom or somewhere else on the machine, but if you look up your machine with the name that's on the front of it, as well as where to find the model number, you'll be able to find the model number for the machine that you specifically have. So, we're going to need that screwdriver, and we're going to need a new pack of belts. Now, most Bissell vacuums use the 7, 9, 10, 12, 14, 16 belt. Most full-size Bissell upright vacuums that have single motors and have belts don't have separate motors like the Liftoff series. So most of these Power Force or Clean View, Power Glide, Power Track, Power Lifter, anything with power in the name really, will generally have just a simple rubber belt with screws that come off of the bottom, and will use this type of belt. So it's recommended that you generally unplug your machine before you use it, so that way you can't accidentally turn it on while you're working on it. But since you can hear that screeching and rubbing. But since I am a professional, I will not do that, mainly because if I turn it on during the video, it may injure me and cause you some entertainment. So, in order to replace our belt, we're going to press the handle release pedal, lay the machine down, and we're going to flip it over. So that way we can actually see the bottom portion of the machine. And we have proper access to the belt and everything else. Then we're going to take our screwdriver and simply remove the 4 screws. Again, for my particular model, which is the Bissell Power Force Model 1398, that is the process for this unit. Just take out these 4 screws. Ideally, use a brand new screwdriver or one that you know doesn't have any strips in it, because if you strip these screws, you will have great difficulty getting the bottom base off of your machine. So once you get 1 screw out, just repeat that process for the other 4 screws. Now that we've removed all the screws from this unit, we can remove this bottom plate. Now, some newer models, like a lot of the newer Power Force units that you'll see in stores nowadays, or Clean View models, will also have a clip or two, usually around this area, or perhaps in the rear, or somewhere on the front. So these clips will be holding the bottom plate in place in addition to the screws. So if this doesn't completely freely come off like this one does, you may have to wiggle it a little bit to get the clips to come undone. Don't force it because you don't want to break any clips, but generally you can tell whether or not it's actually going to come free. So once you remove that plate, we can see the brush roll and the belt. Now is also a good time. If your brush roll is full of dirt, or if it has a lot of hair wrapped around it, now is a good time to check it. And this tutorial will also be good for if you're replacing your brush roll, because obviously you have to pull out the brush roll to replace the belt. So if you're replacing your brush roll, you just put in a new brush roll. So this is very simple. Just grab the brush roll in the center and pull it straight out. If your belt is either broken or burned and loosened like this, then there shouldn't be very There should be very little resistance with your brush actually coming out of the unit. And also, you want to take the brush and turn it on its side and make sure it spins freely. If it does not spin freely like this, then try adding some motor oil or some 3-in-1 sort of oil to either side of the Brushroll bearings and see if that frees it up. And also, if there's any hair or anything caught in the bearings, see if that frees it up as well. If that does not free it up to the degree that it's this smooth when you spin it, again, you want to hold it like this so there's nothing on the brush and just sort of spin it with your fingers. It should spin very freely and for a couple extra seconds after you let it go. If it does not spin this freely, then the Brushroll bearings could be seized and you may need to replace your Brushroll. Now, there is a way to pop off these end caps and actually replace the bearings inside the Brushroll, but generally Bissell doesn't recommend that, and if you're watching this tutorial, chances are you wouldn't want to have to deal with that, and you'd be better off just replacing the Brushroll assembly entirely, which this is basically the Brushroll. So you would just get another one of these. Again, just look up your model number. There's only a few different types of brush rollers as far as, there's different colors and stuff, but as far as what actually works, there's only a few different types. There's basically a standard type like this, and then a wider type for wide path units. So again, look up your model number. Again, it's on a sticker right on the back of your machine. Sometimes these stickers do fall off, so again, if you're having trouble with it, then let me know what the script on the front of it is and some sort of basic physical description, and I can point you in the direction of finding the right brush roll for your machine. So again, if this is spinning freely, and this has been cleaned off and everything, then we know that this is prepped and can be set aside as we prep the new belt. Now, if your belt has just gone out right before you start doing this, then be careful, because the actual section by where the belt is, as well as by the motor pulley, could still be hot. As I touch this with my finger, this is very, very hot. So, generally speaking, you want to let this cool down, this entire system cool down, and ideally not do this immediately after you vacuum. You'll want to do this perhaps before you start to vacuum again for the next week or however long it is between the times that you vacuum. That way you have the fresh belt on, you can immediately try it, and also your old belt isn't, freshly used and this whole area isn't warm. So be careful. If this has been freshly used, you very well could burn yourself, as these different points on the machine could possibly be warm if your belt was rubbing or slipping like mine was. So, again, if you have the old belt, it's very simple. You can see the little metal pulley in there like this. Just loop the belt around, and again, if your belt is snapped, then obviously this will be easy. But if your belt is still together, if a bit loose like mine is, then it'll be a little bit harder to pull it out, but it can still be done. Really, the hardest part is just doing this one-handed while I'm holding the camera. But if you're actually just doing this, then it's relatively easy to just kind of work the belt around the motor pulley. You can kind of feel where the edge is and just kind of slip it around there from the front, so that way it slides underneath it. Again, this is easier said than done when you're looking at it through a camera, so this is not the best example, but obviously you can just kind of pull it out. I mean, I guess if you were really frustrated with this and you were discarding this belt anyway, you could just cut it, but that shouldn't be necessary. You should be able to thread this out, and I want to actually do this on camera, but for some reason this is being difficult, but this is good because this is a real-world example. There we go. You can see we got it threaded around that shaft and underneath, so we can pull it straight out. Now, you want to make sure that your motor spindle doesn't have any rust on it, because rust will cause tension on the belt and could cause it to get stretched out again and possibly break. So you want to make sure there's no belt. If there's some discoloration like this, you're okay. Maybe whenever you get your vacuum serviced, you may want to address that. But this motor spindle is still entirely smooth, and there's no rust or any corrosion on it, so it should not have any issues harboring a new belt. So, now that we have the old belt off, we can see that this particular belt is pretty badly chewed up. This is obviously pretty badly stretched out as well. So we can see whenever we take the new packet of belts and open this up, which I didn't do before I started this video, we can see that the new belt that we're going to pick out is going to be significantly smaller than the old belt, and that's what you want. You want a tight new belt, because rubber belts do stretch out over time and will lose tension on the brush, and as a result the brush will not spin properly, and in some cases, like you saw earlier in this video, get jammed entirely due to there not being enough tension on the brush and the brush stopping pretty much whenever it feels like it. So now that we finally opened this, which is really hard to do with one hand when you're holding a camera, or in my case I'll just rip the package entirely. Once we get one of the new belts out, you can see this is a pack of 2 belts. We obviously don't need the second one, so we can set that aside. We can see the new belt is so much smaller than the old belt. Obviously the old belt's on the outside, the brand new belt is in the center. We can see how much smaller it is. That's good. Doesn't mean you have the wrong belt. Again, all of these belts that you will find in stores or online will generally list all the model numbers that the belt is compatible with. So in my case, the 1398 Power Force is on here. If I can find it in this long list of random numbers. But yeah, oh, there it is. You can see 1398. So that is my specific model. So again, depending on your machine, you would simply match up those model numbers. Again, just to verify that you have exactly the correct part. Because this will be a little bit tight when we put it on. So in this old belt, we can get rid of that. That does, okay, that didn't do what I wanted to do. We can get rid of that, and we can take the new belt and slip it around the motor shaft. Very simple. Oh, okay, I say that and then it doesn't go. Again, whenever I'm doing this not in front of a camera, I can do this entire process in less than a minute, but maybe not less than a minute, less than 3 minutes. So, and you can too, once you get the hang of it. And you also want to pull the belt a little bit, make sure it's centered on the motor shaft. You don't want it to be close to the edge, but we can see, you can kind of just angle it and pull it on that spindle. It should be spinning the spindle freely. And then now this is going to be the hard part, trying to do this while filming. You want to take the brush and, of course, line it up like this, but with the belt around it. And, again, this is going to be hard to get while filming if I don't have it actually set up somewhere. Maybe this box will help. See, I don't prepare for these videos because this is the real world where you don't exactly get to set up the best tripod. There, you can see that. So, then you want to take the belt. You probably can't see it all that well. But on the Brushroll, there's this round side. This is the side that's the closest to the belt area. And there's this little notch side. So obviously the notch side is going to have to go in one way, and it will fit into the casing of the vacuum. It's pretty simple to line up. And then obviously this round side will go in any which way. So we want to loop the Brushroll around the belt. Again, if you replace your Brushroll, then you also want to replace your belt at the same time, just so you have all new parts. And, ooh, see, this can sometimes happen. If you don't put the belt on the motor spindle correctly, it may pop off. So again, you want to line that up and make sure that is all the way, oh, and my phone fell. You want to make sure that is all the way lined up. I know this isn't the most ideal sort of filming in the world, but this is the real world. This is exactly me doing it on one of my own machines. So again, make sure this belt is lined up and stretch the Brushroll down into this slot, just like this. And then now that this part is in, which again is going to be the part that's the closest to the belt, now we want to take this side, sorry about that, and line this up and slot it in just like that. Now we want to spin the Brushroll by hand a few times to make sure that everything is lined up. Make sure the belt is centered on the brush, and make sure the belt is centered on the motor pulley. We can see the metal does stick out a little bit, which is what we want. We don't want it right up against this plastic. We also don't want it right up against this little guard here as well. We want it properly centered, just like that. And you can see that little guard is doing its job at making sure this doesn't go beyond this. So if it does rub up against this a little bit, it's okay. But generally speaking, you want this as centered as possible. Sometimes you may want to just adjust it yourself and just kind of scoot it over a little bit. That's fine. Again, once you have it turned by hand just like this. Now, I don't recommend this, but I will do this where I'll turn it on just for a brief second so you can see it spinning with the new belt. So we can see the new belt is on properly. There is no issues with the belt and how it's working. So everything is working on this just fine. So we are free to put the plate on. And again, on this particular machine, it's extremely easy. It just pops right back in. There's no clips or anything, but depending on your machine, you may have some clips in the way that you'll have to snap in place first. And if those clips get in the way, then just make sure those are all lined up. You don't want to break your bottom plate, but if you do break your bottom plate, Bissell's really good at finding parts, so it should be very easy to get a replacement if you need it. Ruby, do you want to help me fix the vacuum? Ruby, you want to help me fix the vacuum? You want to help me fix the vacuum, Rubes? No? Okay. So now that the bottom plate is on, we're going to take all of our screws. Again, in this case, if your machine obviously has just the clips, then just snap the clips in place and you're done. But in this case, we have the screws, so we're going to put the screws in and then tighten them with the Phillips head screwdriver. I don't think I need to show that on film. I think you generally know how that works. But I'm going to quickly fill in these screws before my dog eats them. And there we go. Now that all the screws are in place, you're good to go. Again, make sure that the actual screws aren't stripped. Make sure that the screwdriver that you're using is the correct size. Make sure the screws don't have any rust on them. I've seen a lot of these machines over the years where they have rust on the screws and then they snap when you try to drive them in or out. So if your screws are rusted, just replace them. Get new screws. You can get new screws on Bissell.com. Pretty much all of the screws are the same. And definitely don't save yourself that hassle, because if you strip one of these screws and the plate is stuck on, you're going to have a really bad time trying to get it back off without snapping it, because this is all plastic. So just keep that in mind. These screws are pretty fragile. If you take good care of your machine and you're watching this video in the first place, that probably means you take care of your machine enough to where hopefully it doesn't get to that point. But if it does, just know you may be in for a little bit of a nightmare if you're trying to pull off these screws while they're rusted and while there's a lot of corrosion all over the bottom of the machine. But if you don't have that problem, if your machine looks similar to this, where it's about what you'd expect for, 5 years of use, then you should be okay. Now we can just take the machine, snap the handle lock in place, pull it into the upright position. Kind of manhandling the thing, but it's lightweight, it can handle it. And we can tell now that the brush is indeed spinning freely. So we can see it's working just fine. So again, once you take the O-belt, you want to take the O-belt and you want to throw it away. Just like that. And now, want to take the second belt that comes in the pack of belts and make sure to put them away in a drawer somewhere where you know it'll be safe for whenever you need to replace your belt later on. Then you want to pet your dog. Good girl. And then you want to try out your new vacuum after you just fixed it. Now, if your wheels are squeaky like mine are on this Power Force, you're going to want to put some WD-40 on the wheels just to make sure they don't squeak like that, because honestly, this sounds like you have chipmunks stuck in the wheels of your vacuum. But regarding the belt, which is what you came here for, after replacing the belt, this vacuum has a night and day difference in performance. Before, the Brushroll would stop on pretty much any sort of carpet, despite the fact that the belt was still in one piece. It was stretched out to the point where obviously the previous owner had not replaced it in the entire 5 years. And after I refurbished this machine, I did put the original belt back on it just to show how much wear it had gone through in the last 5 years. And now we can see that after replacing that belt with all other variables of the machine being the same, the difference in the performance is night and day. So it's amazing what a $5 belt can do to make your vacuum completely overhaul its performance into brand new condition. Now, most people would think, oh, if the Brushroll is spinning, kind of, then sure, it's obviously fine, it doesn't need anything. And if it does, people will assume that it's not a very simple issue that they can do themselves. This is a very simple thing that you can do yourself. You don't have to hire anyone to do it for you. You can if you want, but it's something that very easy to DIY. Obviously, many of the companies, including Bissell in this example, make it very easy to replace the belts on these budget vacuums and to keep the machine up and running. So hopefully this video was helpful. Hopefully this tutorial was helpful. I can't talk today. with helping you replace the belt on your Bissell upright vacuum. Again, this is applicable for many different models of Bissell vacuum, with perhaps the only discrepancy being that if you have a compact Bissell, the Bissell style 3130 belts are what you would use instead of the Bissell style 7, 9, 10, 12, 14, 16 belts. I think I got that correct. Anyway guys, this is Untitled Studios signing out, and hopefully this tutorial was helpful in helping you replace the belt on your Bissell upright vacuum. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one. Peace.